My name's Sarah. These days, I work with my husband John at his family's company. The company is small, run by my father-in-law, Richard, and has about 6 employees. Richard mostly lets us handle things, and John, who will take over as president, works really hard. He's always looking for new clients and projects to help the company grow. When there's a big project, everyone pitches in, and the office feels lively and fun. I've been here for 10 years, ever since I married John. One day, when I got home early to cook dinner, John was still at work. My mother-in-law, Nancy, who used to work at the company before John and I got married, seemed bothered. She'd been looking forward to retirement, but lately, she'd been picking on me more often. "Sarah, how long do you plan to stick around our family business?" she asked sharply. Confused, I asked her what she meant. She implied that I only married John because I couldn't find a job elsewhere, and now I was taking advantage of working for the family. Feeling frustrated, I explained that I chose to work here and wasn't forced into it. But Nancy didn't seem to believe me. She thought she knew everything about me and walked away without listening. But my issues with my mother-in-law weren't just about her words. When she quit her job to take care of the household, she didn't do anything. Even though my father-in-law asked her to help out with housework since she was home all day, she refused, saying, "I've worked all my life. Now it's the daughter-in-law's turn to do the housework." So it usually fell on me to prepare dinner. Nancy did whatever she wanted for lunch, but she never cleaned up afterward. Every day, when I got back from errands, I'd find a pile of dirty dishes waiting for me, which was frustrating and tiring. One sunny afternoon, I mustered up the courage to talk to Nancy about this. "Nancy," I said hesitantly, "I've noticed the dishes are often left in the sink. It would really help if you could clean up after your meals. It's just a small request, but it would mean a lot to me." Her response wasn't understanding at all. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she snapped, "Are you trying to give me orders in my own house? You're just a daughter-in-law. How dare you dictate what I should do?" Her words stung, reminding me of the delicate balance in our family dynamics. "I wish Jessica were here instead of you," she continued bitterly. "She's far more considerate and understanding than you could ever be." Jessica, my sister-in-law, was ambitious and spirited. Even though we didn't spend much time together, I admired her dedication. She had missed our wedding because of a hangover, but she was making a name for herself in Manhattan, working hard in fashion design. Trying to change the subject, I mentioned Jessica's achievements, hoping to ease the tension. However, Nancy's views on Manhattan were far from favorable. She saw it as a cold and impersonal city, not suitable for someone as warm-hearted as Jessica. Then she turned her attention to me, realizing that I was from Manhattan. In her mind, it all made sense. My supposed aloof manner toward her. Caught in this exhausting exchange, I realized that if I didn't start preparing dinner soon, we'd be eating much later than usual. Despite battling my own frustrations, I managed to keep a composed exterior. "Mom, let's continue this conversation later. I need to focus on getting dinner ready, or we'll be eating quite late tonight," I said with a hint of reluctance. Finally, Nancy retreated to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the clatter of cooking utensils. Richard and John were both aware of Nancy's mistreatment towards me as a daughter-in-law, and they tried to intervene whenever they saw it happening. But their efforts seemed to have little effect. Every time they confronted the situation, their faces showed concern and frustration, a testament to their desire to create harmony in our family dynamics. Ironically, whenever Richard and John scolded Nancy for her behavior, she redirected her anger towards me, becoming even more hostile and sharp with her words. Her usually kind and gentle face twisted with disdain, and her tone cut deeper than before. Though I had never been subjected to physical violence, the emotional toll of Nancy's words was significant. Richard and John's support had been my solace, allowing me to somewhat ignore Nancy's harsh words. But then one morning, something unimaginable happened. Just after I finished cleaning up from breakfast and was preparing to leave for work, in the midst of the morning rush, Nancy suddenly exclaimed. "Oh my, what a mess they've made here!" Nancy exclaimed suddenly, without warning, as she doused my handbag with a bucket of water. I was stunned, a mixture of shock and anger rendering me speechless. "What are you doing, Nancy?" I managed to stutter out, my voice trembling with disbelief. Nancy's response was flippant, her tone resembling that of a mischievous child. "Oh, was that your stuff? I thought it was just a big piece of trash," she said casually. Her casual dismissal of the situation infuriated me. Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on it? What kind of mindset is that? And now the carpet is all wet. What about the vacuum cleaner? I exclaimed, my words a jumble of anger and confusion, as I frantically emptied the water-soaked contents of my bag, including documents I needed for work, onto the table. Nancy responded nonchalantly, her face calm, showing no signs of remorse or concern for my distress. "Because you don't need to go to work anymore," she stated matter-of-factly. Baffled, I sat opposite Nancy in the living room bathed in the morning light. Her expression was colder, more resolute than usual, as if she had made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," I responded, laden with confusion and surprise. "You've been clinging to this house for 10 years, but finally I can get rid of you," Nancy declared, her words piercing my heart with their anger and determination. My mind reeled, and my heart filled with sorrow. "Getting rid of me?" I questioned, disbelief in my voice. Her words made me feel like an outsider in this family. "Actually, my daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day," she continued, her mocking laughter further wounding me. She was using my position at work to force me out. I had dedicated years to that job, building respect and memories. I was dumbfounded, feeling like my sacrifices meant nothing to her. It appalled me, not just that she acted this way, but that after 10 years of dedication, she could ask me to leave in place of her daughter. It felt like my decade of effort was being rendered worthless. I thought to myself, "Are you sure about this? Wasn't Jessica working in a clothing store in Manhattan?" I questioned, reflecting my confusion and apprehension. My job was more than just a source of income. It was my avenue for self-fulfillment. Meanwhile, Jessica, my sister-in-law, seemed to have grown tired of city life and had chosen to return to the family. She said she was tired of dealing with the cold people of Manhattan, so I told her she came back home. I have a job ready for her. She agreed to return immediately. "Now that she's coming back, she wants you out of this house," Nancy explained to me. I found her words hard to believe. She was ready to overturn my life with a single decision, completely disregarding my place in the family without even listening to me. "I've written your resignation letter," she said, handing me an envelope. In that moment, my heart shattered completely. Everything I had built over the years was reduced to nothing, treated like a mere piece of paper. Her actions severed our family bond irreparably. I headed to the company, just a brisk 3-minute walk from my home. My mind was a whirlwind of apprehension and anticipation as I walked under the cool morning sky. Each step felt heavy with the weight of what was to come. Upon reaching the office, I shared with my father-in-law Richard and my husband John. I told them what my mother-in-law had said. Their faces were a mix of shock and thinly veiled anger, yet they remained composed. They suggested that maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to resign to show her the reality of the situation. This suggestion sent my heart into turmoil. Having worked tirelessly in our family-run business for years, I barely knew what a long vacation felt like, aside from brief rests during Thanksgiving and the holiday season. Encouraged by John and Richard's gentle words, "Why don't you spread your wings for a change?" I made up my mind to embark on a little trip. As I packed, I found myself pondering deeply about my life, my choices, and what lay ahead. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law Jessica, who had come to replace me at the company, shockingly didn't show up until 1:00 p.m. Her irresponsible attitude left John and Richard, who had been holding the fort in my absence, in a state of dismay. Jessica seemed utterly disinterested in understanding the work, despite their attempts to explain it to her. Hearing about this, I couldn't help but feel A twinge of anxiety about the future of our company lingered as I looked forward to my trip. Departing without encountering my mother-in-law, I swiftly set off. During the journey, as I enjoyed the view outside the train, I reflected on my life, the past, the present, and what was yet to come. Relishing the local seafood delicacies, I contemplated deeply about myself, my family, and our business. However, the tranquility of my fourth day was shattered when Jessica called me in tears. "What's going on? Mom said it was an easy job, just sitting in a chair, but John and Dad are acting like I can't do anything right," she said, her words most likely influenced by my mother-in-law. Even as I enjoyed my leisure, I realized it was time to address the situation. "So, Jessica, how proficient are you with computers?" I asked hesitantly. Her response indicated her limited skill in a professional setting, mainly focused on watching videos and playing games online. Considering her background in the apparel industry, I asked further about her experience with tasks like managing sales data in Excel or recording customer information in Word. She seemed puzzled, indicating her lack of familiarity with such tools. Digging deeper into her technical experience, I asked about image editing, video editing, or audio editing software. Her bewildered response suggested she had little to no experience with these tools. However, when asked about handling calculations for sales or filling in documents, she confidently stated that she could do that. This conversation shed light on Jessica's capabilities, highlighting areas where she might need additional training or support to adapt to her new role in our company. However, when probed further with, "Can you calculate tax too, right?" her confidence waned as she responded uncertainly. This question was a test of her mathematical skills and ability to apply them in a business context. While Jessica might have other skills, it was apparent she felt insecure about the required skill set for the job. Her discomfort seemed particularly rooted in her struggle with calculations, which could be why she faced criticism from Richard and John. First and foremost, it was necessary to give my mother-in-law and her cohort, who tried to oust me, a taste of their own medicine. "Since you're taking over my job, I expect you to handle the accounting tasks efficiently. Be mindful of email etiquette." A casual tone suitable for friends is utterly inappropriate for business communication. Also, you'll be responsible for scheduling the staff shifts. Though our team is small, everyone's requests for time off are carefully considered, so make sure not to prioritize your own convenience over theirs. As I continued to list down my demands, I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. "But I was told I wouldn't have to do anything. Why are there so many tasks? I didn't come back home for this," she exclaimed, abruptly ending the call. In the following 3 days, I decided to enjoy sightseeing in Manhattan, where Jessica had fled from. My experience taught me that not everyone in Manhattan is cold-hearted. In fact, it seemed rarer to find people as cold-hearted as my mother-in-law and Jessica, who had conspired to drive me away. A week after leaving my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. Upon my arrival, Nancy, with her face flushed red, confronted me with a burst of anger. How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," she exclaimed furiously, her eyes brimming with anger and misunderstanding. She made a move to grab me, but John and Richard quickly intervened. They tried to calm her down, but her anger seemed far from subsiding. John sighed deeply before speaking. "Jessica is crying because she was scolded for trying to boss around her employees, despite her inability to do anything right. It's not Sarah's fault. Besides, Sarah hasn't been here for a week, so there's no way she could have upset Jessica, Mother. You really need to stop these baseless accusations." John's voice was calm yet carried a weight, trying to convey the facts and clear the misunderstanding. "But it's because of her. This woman is the reason for Jessica's suffering," Nancy retorted emotionally, directing her suspicions towards me. Her words lacked any foundation of truth. "Where is Jessica, by the way?" I asked, looking around the living room, but Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Her absence added more mystery to the already puzzling situation. "Jessica's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and saying she doesn't want to go to work anymore, John explained. It seemed like Jessica had run away from learning the job well. It was understandable that she would find it challenging, considering she lacked the skills to fill in for me. You've been poisoning John and Richard against me, haven't you? If not, they wouldn't say the company ran better with me than with the incompetent Jessica. Nancy accused me vehemently. Her words were filled with long-standing misunderstandings and prejudices, leaving me utterly perplexed. She seemed to have always viewed me as an adversary, her words reflecting years of misconceptions. John let out a heavy sigh, his face showing weariness and frustration with the tangled web of emotions in this family. He had tried repeatedly to resolve the misunderstandings among family members, but his efforts seemed far from fruitful. Mom, I know it might sound a bit odd coming from me, but Sarah is truly exceptional at her work. She has a certification in bookkeeping, and her secretarial skills are top-notch. Moreover, she has studied Spanish and even has experience studying abroad. When it comes to dealing with multiple languages at our company, Sarah is the one who handles everything, John explained with a sense of pride, and his mother, Nancy, looked utterly surprised. Nancy had assumed that I quit my job as soon as I joined the family, so she had no idea about my contributions and achievements at work. That sounds like something straight out of a TV drama. Actually, back in college, I was so focused on getting various certifications. I immersed myself in my studies to the point where I hardly participated in clubs or had time for a romantic relationship. It was during this phase of my life that I met John, who visited my company for business. I inadvertently found myself sharing the story of how John and I first met. However, I realized that this wasn't what Nancy wanted to hear. I steered the conversation back to the original topic. In a nutshell, I was entrusted with a wide array of responsibilities at the company, from handling accounting tasks to schedule coordination, liaising with other companies, and managing employee shifts. There were numerous tasks under my purview. Thanks to that, I was able to focus on reaching out to other companies for business deals. The work environment became much more comfortable compared to the times when you were around. Mom, John added, leaving Nancy with her mouth agape in amazement. Just then, Richard, John's father, chimed in with a comment that took me by surprise. We're going to shut down that company soon. Actually, Jessica made a big blunder. Despite being asked to prepare some documents, she decided to handle phone calls because it seemed more fun doing so. While John and I were away, she ended up behaving rudely to the person in charge from Company A. Of course, I got a call to confirm this. Hearing this, I was so shocked that I instinctively covered my mouth with my hand. I can't believe Jessica would do something like that, I murmured, filled with disbelief. The thought that Jessica's actions might lead to the downfall of our company flashed through my mind, filling me with dread. However, as I wallowed in these anxious thoughts, the story took an unexpected turn. When I explained the situation, they suggested it might be time to end the family business. We had mentioned this to you before, right? About being absorbed by another company, John's father said. Then, the president of Company A stepped forward, saying he was interested if Sarah and I were involved. This was an unexpected yet long-hoped-for development. With a family-run business, there are limitations, and it's uncertain whether we could consistently acquire stable customers. That's why John had always been working hard in sales, trying to secure new clients. Being absorbed by a larger company could mean securing a steady customer base. The once uncertain future suddenly seemed to hold a glimmer of hope. However, this news brought relief only to me, John, and his father. John's mother suddenly opposed the idea, saying, "That's not acceptable. John must become the president. This company is ours, isn't it?" I was taken aback by this sudden change in the situation. It seemed that more than a stable future, Nancy was concerned about maintaining the status of being part of a company president's family. And you're telling me he's not going to be the president anymore? Absolutely not acceptable, exclaimed Nancy passionately. This commotion piqued the interest of Jessica, who was upstairs in her room, leading her to come down to the living room to see what was happening. In response to the chaos started by Nancy, Richard spoke up with a calm but final statement. I am divorcing you. So either way, you will no longer be part of this executive family. Not only have you not changed your attitude towards my wife, but you also neglect household chores. To top it off, you spend your days out with young men instead of being home. I have no intention of supporting such a wife any longer. This was news to both me and John. We were so shocked that we could only stare at Sarah's father-in-law with wide eyes. It seemed he had planned to discuss divorce from the beginning as he took out divorce papers and a photo of Nancy with a young man from the living room shelf, placing them on the table. If you sign the divorce papers now and leave with your belongings, I won't demand alimony. I know getting any money from you would be futile anyway. Futile. Divorce? How can you say that? Haven't I devoted myself to this house all these years? Nancy exclaimed in disbelief. Have you done any proper housework in these last 10 years? Have you ever helped with the business? Does spending someone else's money on young men count as devotion to the house? It was the first time we saw Sarah's usually mild-mannered and reserved father-in-law this angry. Seeing this, Jessica, who had come down to the living room, was visibly trembling from the shock. Jessica, you're part of this too. You came back home because you couldn't make it in Manhattan, and now you can't find a job but still act all high and mighty. In the end, you stopped working entirely. Whose escapism did you inherit? It's time for you to leave this house, he continued. Next, we saw Jessica's shock and resistance. She believed she was an important member of the family, but the reality was different. Wait a minute, Dad. Mom might be at a lost cause, but I'm your precious daughter. Right? The family conflict deepened as Jessica voiced her concerns. Jessica asserts her place, revealing her betrayal towards her mother. Jessica, are you betraying Mom now? Nancy was astounded, feeling betrayed by her daughter at the last moment. However, as the two started to create a commotion, Richard sternly silenced them with a shout. If I just kick you out, it'll cause trouble for everyone. So I've asked an acquaintance to take you in. They'll be here soon to pick you up. Get your minimum belongings ready. Left with no choice but to obey, Nancy begins packing her belongings with Jessica. After writing the divorce notice, an acquaintance of Richard's arrived to take Nancy and Jessica away. The person who came to pick them up was running a factory with dormitories, and it seemed they would be working there. John, Richard, and I talked to the employees about the company being absorbed and prepared for the busy days ahead for our future. Finally, I found out I was pregnant at that time. When I told the president of Company A, he was delighted and promised to send someone to replace me, which was a huge relief. Currently, John and Richard are working even harder for the sake of our upcoming child.